What if everything you believed about spies was wrong? Not fast cars, not explosions, but silence, doubt, and decisions made in rooms where no one raises their voice. These stories do not celebrate espionage. They expose it, the fear, the patience, the cost. Because behind every mission lies something far more dangerous than failure. The truth that no one involved is ever fully in control. Number 20. Bridge of Spies, 2015. There is a quiet moment in this story that most viewers overlook. No guns, no chase. Just a man standing on a bridge, staring into the cold divide of ideology. And that moment tells you everything about how real espionage actually works. In Bridge of Spies, the illusion of glamorous spy work is stripped away piece by piece. What remains is something far more unsettling. Negotiation, patience, the slow grind of legal maneuvering. James Donovan is not a trained operative. He is a lawyer pulled into a world where words can carry the same weight as weapons. That detail alone reflects reality. Intelligence agencies often rely on civilians to maintain distance from direct involvement. The prisoner exchange unfolds with almost unbearable restraint. No explosions, no spectacle, only silence and tension. Will both sides honor the agreement? Will someone break protocol at the final moment? That uncertainty is the essence of Tradecraft. What lingers is the humanity of it all. Rudolph Abel is not presented as a monster. He is composed, disciplined, almost dignified. And that complexity is what makes the story feel authentic. Because in the Cold War, the enemy was never simple. It was someone just as trained, just as committed. Our standing on the other side of the same fragile line. Number 19. The Courier, 2020. Some of the most valuable spies in history never looked like spies at all. They looked ordinary, harmless, invisible, and that is exactly what made them effective. In The Courier, the focus shifts to Greville Wynne, a businessman with no formal training and no understanding of the world he is about to enter. That is precisely why he becomes useful. Intelligence work often depends on people who can move without suspicion, people who blend in so completely that no one thinks to question them. The recruitment process unfolds quietly. There is no dramatic turning point, no heroic declaration, just subtle pressure and calculated persuasion. By the time Wynne realizes the danger, he is already entangled in something irreversible. From that moment forward, every interaction feels fragile. Meetings are brief, exchanges are silent. Every glance carries weight. Surveillance is never fully visible, yet always present. That constant tension becomes suffocating. What makes the story resonate is the psychological toll. This is not a life built for heroes. It is built on fear and endurance. The longer Wynne operates, the more isolated he becomes. And in that isolation lies the truth. Espionage does not reward bravery. It demands invisibility. And the moment that invisibility fades, everything begins to collapse. Number 18. Torn Curtain, 1966. There is a single moment in this story that refuses to leave your mind. A struggle that should be quick, but is not. It drags. It resists. It exposes something most films try to hide. In Torn Curtain, that moment becomes a statement. Espionage is not clean. It is not efficient. It is messy and exhausting and deeply human. The illusion of effortless action is replaced with something far more believable. Survival is never guaranteed. The narrative follows a scientist who appears to defect to East Germany. Beneath that surface lies a far more dangerous operation. False defection requires precision. Every word must be controlled. Every reaction must be measured. One mistake can unravel everything. What stands out is the constant pressure of surveillance. Movement is restricted. Conversations feel monitored. Even silence carries risk. There is no safe space, only shifting layers of observation. Escape sequences are stripped of fantasy. Nothing comes easily. Every step forward feels uncertain. Every ally could be compromised without warning, and that is where the film finds its power, not in action, but in vulnerability. Because real espionage is not about dominating the situation. It is about staying alive long enough to complete the mission without being exposed. Number 17. The Russia House, 1990. There is a particular kind of tension that does not come from danger, but from uncertainty. the kind where a single document can shift global power, yet no one is completely sure if that document is real. The Russia House builds its entire foundation on that fragile uncertainty. A manuscript surfaces from the Soviet Union claiming to expose weaknesses in their nuclear capabilities. It sounds like a breakthrough. It feels like a trap. And that duality is exactly how real intelligence operations function. The central figure is not a hardened agent, but a publisher pulled into something far beyond his control. That choice reflects a recurring truth in espionage. Civilians often become the most valuable conduits because they exist outside predictable patterns. Verification becomes the real battlefield. Not action, not confrontation. Just the slow process of determining whether the information is genuine or manufactured deception. Every conversation carries hidden intent. Every handler questions the source while pretending not to. What emerges is a portrait of mistrust. Allies doubt each other. Agencies compete quietly. No one fully commits because the cost of being wrong is catastrophic. And that is the uncomfortable reality. Espionage is rarely about certainty. It is about navigating doubt while pretending you understand the truth. Number 16. The Ipcress File, 1965. Some intelligence operations do not feel dangerous at first. They feel routine, almost boring. Paperwork, interviews, endless questions with no clear answers. And that illusion is exactly what makes them effective. The Ipcress File rejects everything audiences expect from a spy story. There is no glamour, no high-speed pursuit. Instead, there is Harry Palmer moving through a world defined by bureaucracy and quiet suspicion. The investigation revolves around missing scientists and the possibility of brainwashing, but the real focus is process. Files are reviewed. Patterns are analyzed. Conversations are dissected for meaning. It feels closer to detective work than traditional espionage. What makes the experience unsettling is how controlled everything appears on the surface, while something far more disturbing unfolds underneath. Even the agency itself feels untrustworthy. Orders come without explanation. Authority is never fully transparent. The brainwashing element introduces a psychological dimension that feels grounded rather than exaggerated. It suggests that control is not always physical. It can be subtle, repetitive, gradual. By the time the truth begins to emerge, it is already clear that the system itself is part of the problem. And that is the quiet revelation. Espionage does not just operate in shadows. Sometimes it is hidden inside the structure that claims to protect you. Number 15. The Dead Season, 1968. There is a level of patience required in espionage that most people would never tolerate. Years of preparation. Layers of identity, entire lives constructed for a single purpose. The Dead Season explores that patience with unsettling precision. A Soviet agent operates deep within foreign territory under a carefully maintained cover. Nothing about his existence is spontaneous. Every movement is calculated long before it happens. The story does not rush. It unfolds slowly because real operations rarely accelerate without consequence. Surveillance is constant but rarely obvious. The threat is not immediate exposure. It is gradual discovery. What stands out is the emotional detachment required to sustain such a life. Relationships become tools. Conversations become performances. Even moments of normalcy feel artificial. And counterintelligence plays a central role. The opposition is just as methodical, just as disciplined. This creates a quiet tension where both sides are constantly probing for weaknesses without revealing their own. There are no dramatic confrontations, only small shifts that signal something has changed, a glance that lingers too long, a pattern that does not align. And that is what makes it authentic. Espionage at this level is not about action. It is about endurance, the ability to exist inside a lie for so long that it begins to feel like truth. Number 14. The Hunt for Red October, 1990. Sometimes the most dangerous move in espionage is not an attack. It is a decision, a choice made in silence that forces entire systems to react without fully understanding what is happening. The Hunt for Red October builds its tension around that exact premise. A Soviet submarine commander makes a move that appears hostile but carries a hidden intention. The entire conflict becomes a matter of interpretation rather than direct confrontation. What makes the scenario feel grounded is the emphasis on analysis. Intelligence officers are not rushing into action. They are studying patterns, listening to fragments, trying to construct meaning from incomplete data. That process mirrors real intelligence work where decisions are often based on probability rather than certainty. The chain of command adds another layer of realism. Orders move slowly, doubt spreads quickly. No one wants to make the wrong call because the consequences extend far beyond the immediate situation. Even the idea of defection is handled with restraint. It is not portrayed as heroic. It is presented as a calculated risk that could collapse at any moment if misunderstood. The real tension does not come from weapons. It comes from perception. One misread signal could trigger disaster. And that is the underlying truth. Espionage is often less about what is happening and more about what people believe is happening. Number 13. No Way Out. 1987. There is a particular kind of fear that comes from being hunted by the very system you serve. A realization that the structure you trust can turn against you without warning. No Way Out thrives on that internal collapse. A murder investigation inside the Pentagon slowly transforms into something far more dangerous. A search for a mole, a hunt for a ghost that may or may not exist. What makes the narrative effective is its focus on procedure. The investigation is not chaotic. It is methodical. Data is processed. Timelines are reconstructed. Technology is used not as spectacle, but as a tool for narrowing possibilities. The deeper the search goes, the more suffocating the environment becomes. Every corridor feels watched. Every conversation carries risk. The protagonist is not just solving a mystery. He is trying to survive within a system that is closing in around him. What elevates the tension is the uncertainty of identity. Anyone could be the target. Anyone could be the threat. Trust erodes quickly because there is no clear line between ally and enemy. That erosion is what makes the situation believable. Intelligence work often involves turning inward, investigating your own ranks, questioning your own assumptions. And when that process begins, there is no easy way to stop it. Number 12. The Manchurian Candidate, 1962. Control does not always come from force. Sometimes it comes from influence so subtle that the subject does not even realize it is happening. The Manchurian Candidate explores that unsettling idea through the concept of psychological manipulation. Soldiers are captured and conditioned in ways that blur the line between memory and suggestion. What emerges is not just a weapon, but a human being whose actions can be triggered without conscious intent. The premise may feel extreme, yet it reflects genuine Cold War fears. Both sides experimented with techniques designed to influence behavior. Not always successfully, but often enough to create paranoia that shaped intelligence strategies. What makes the film resonate is how it presents control as something invisible. The subject appears normal, functions normally, lives an ordinary life, until a specific trigger changes everything. That unpredictability creates a different kind of tension, not based on physical danger, but on the fear of hidden influence. The idea that decisions may not truly belong to the person making them. Political manipulation adds another layer. Power structures are shown as vulnerable to subtle interference rather than direct attack. And that is where the film becomes disturbingly relevant. Espionage is not always about gathering secrets. Sometimes it is about rewriting the mind that holds them. Number 11. The Good Shepherd, 2006. There is a moment where a man sits in silence while listening to a recorded voice. No reaction, on no visible emotion, just stillness. And yet behind that stillness, entire lives are being judged and possibly destroyed. The Good Shepherd unfolds like a slow autopsy of intelligence work itself. It traces the formation of an agency that would define modern espionage. What stands out is not power, but isolation. The deeper the protagonist moves into this world, the less human connection remains. Tradecraft is shown in fragments rather than spectacle. Signals are passed without acknowledgement. Surveillance is conducted with patience that borders on obsession. Every operation feels layered with caution because exposure is never far away. What makes the narrative feel authentic is its refusal to simplify morality. Decisions are not framed as right or wrong. They are framed as necessary or unavoidable. That distinction shapes the entire atmosphere. The cost of secrecy becomes personal. Relationships deteriorate, trust disappears. Even loyalty feels conditional. The work demands complete commitment, yet offers no clarity in return. There is no triumphant resolution, only the quiet understanding that the system continues regardless of individual consequence. And that is the core reality. Espionage does not just collect information, it reshapes the people who operate within it until they become indistinguishable from the secrets they protect. Number 10. The Lives of Others. 2006. There is something deeply unsettling about being watched without knowing when it starts or when it ends. Not dramatic surveillance, not visible presence, just quiet observation that never fully reveals itself. The Lives of Others captures that feeling with almost clinical precision. A Stasi officer is assigned to monitor a writer and his partner. What begins as routine surveillance gradually transforms into something far more complex. The process is methodical. Listening devices are installed. Conversations are recorded. Reports are written with detached accuracy. It feels procedural because it is. Surveillance in this context is not chaotic. It is structured and relentless. What changes is not the operation, but the observer. Exposure to the private lives of others begins to alter perception. Empathy slowly interferes with duty. That internal conflict becomes the real tension. The system itself remains unchanged. It continues to demand results. It continues to operate without hesitation. Individual hesitation is not part of the design. What makes the portrayal powerful is its restraint. There are no dramatic confrontations, only gradual shifts that reveal how control operates through observation rather than force. And that is the disturbing truth. Espionage at this level does not require violence. It requires attention, the kind that never looks away. Number 9. A Most Wanted Man. 2014. There is a certain frustration that defines intelligence work. The feeling that progress is happening, but never fast enough. That every decision is delayed by layers of approval and uncertainty. A Most Wanted Man embraces that frustration and turns it into tension. An operation unfolds around a suspected extremist seeking refuge. Multiple agencies become involved, each with its own agenda, each convinced it understands the situation better than the others. The focus remains on process rather than outcome. Meetings take place behind closed doors. Strategies are debated rather than executed. Every step forward is negotiated rather than decided. What emerges is a portrait of bureaucracy as both a tool and an obstacle. Intelligence work depends on coordination, yet is constantly hindered by conflicting priorities. The central figure operates with a sense of urgency that the system cannot match. That imbalance creates pressure that builds quietly rather than explosively. Informants are handled with care but also with calculation. Trust is extended only as far as it remains useful. The moment usefulness fades, so does protection. There is no dramatic resolution, only a realization that control is often an illusion. And that is what makes it real. Espionage is not always about success, and sometimes it is about managing failure before it becomes visible. Number 8. The Day of the Jackal. 1973. Precision is often mistaken for confidence. In reality, it is fear controlled through discipline. Every movement calculated, every decision rehearsed. Because one mistake is enough to end everything. The Day of the Jackal builds its entire narrative around preparation. Not chaos, not improvisation. Just a methodical progression toward a single objective. An assassination that depends entirely on remaining unseen. Identity becomes the most powerful tool. Documents are forged with care. Appearances are adjusted subtly. Nothing feels exaggerated because everything is grounded in plausible technique. The character does not rely on luck. He relies on structure. What makes the story compelling is the parallel investigation. Authorities are not incompetent. They are persistent. They follow patterns. They analyze behavior. The tension comes from watching two systems move toward each other without fully connecting until it is almost too late. There are no unnecessary risks. Every action serves a purpose. Even delays feel intentional rather than accidental. The absence of spectacle is what creates realism. No dramatic shortcuts, no sudden reversals, just a steady build driven by logic. And that is the defining element. Espionage at this level is not reactive. It is planned so carefully that when it finally unfolds, it feels inevitable. Number 7. Tinker Tailor Soldier, Spy, 2011. Confusion can be more dangerous than deception. When information exists but cannot be trusted, it creates a silence filled with doubt rather than clarity. Tinker Tailor Soldier. Spy operates within that silence. A mole exists at the highest level of British intelligence. The problem is not finding evidence. The problem is understanding what that evidence actually means. The investigation unfolds slowly. Files are revisited. Conversations are recalled. Small inconsistencies begin to form patterns. Nothing is obvious because everything is buried beneath layers of misdirection. What makes the portrayal authentic is its restraint. There are no dramatic interrogations, no sudden revelations, only quiet analysis conducted by individuals who understand that being wrong carries consequences far beyond personal failure. Trust becomes the central conflict. Every relationship is questioned. Every memory re-examined. The deeper the search goes, the more unstable the foundation becomes. The environment itself feels suffocating. Offices filled with silence, conversations held in fragments, decisions made without certainty. There is no clean resolution, only the slow uncovering of truth that was always present but never fully visible. And that is the reality of counterintelligence. It is not about discovering something new. It is about recognizing what was hidden in plain sight. Number 6. The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, 1965. There is a moment when a man realizes that the mission he believed in no longer exists, that everything he has done was part of something far more complicated than he was ever told. The Spy Who Came In From the Cold dismantles the idea of clear objectives. What begins as a straightforward operation slowly reveals layers of deception that extend beyond a single agency. The central figure is pushed into a role that requires complete surrender of identity. Actions must appear genuine even when they serve a hidden purpose. That level of commitment creates a tension that feels almost unbearable. What stands out is the moral ambiguity. There are no clear boundaries between right and wrong. Decisions are made based on outcomes rather than principles. Individuals become expendable pieces within a larger design. The pacing reinforces that discomfort. Events unfold without urgency, yet carry significant weight. Every interaction feels deliberate. Every outcome feels predetermined by forces beyond immediate control. By the time the full picture emerges, it becomes clear that manipulation exists on multiple levels. Not just between opposing sides, but within the same structure. And that is the unsettling truth. Espionage does not always protect. Sometimes it consumes everything in its path, including the people who believe they are in control. Number 5. Funeral in Berlin, 1966. Crossing a border during the Cold War was never just a physical act. It was a performance. Every gesture examined, every word weighed, every pause noticed by someone trained to detect what does not belong. Funeral in Berlin builds its tension around that performance. A defection is arranged, or at least that is what it appears to be. Layers of deception unfold as identities shift and intentions become increasingly difficult to read. And the movement between East and West is handled with careful restraint. Checkpoints are not dramatic obstacles. They are controlled environments where the smallest inconsistency can trigger suspicion. Documents must align perfectly. Behavior must remain consistent with the cover story. What makes the narrative compelling is its focus on manipulation. Each participant believes they understand the situation. Each one is slightly wrong. That gap between perception and reality creates a quiet instability that never fully resolves. Information is traded carefully. Trust is extended only when necessary. Even cooperation feels temporary. The city itself becomes part of the operation. Divided, watched, controlled. Movement is possible, but never free. And that is the underlying truth. Espionage in this environment is not about crossing lines. It is about convincing everyone watching that you belong on the side you have chosen to enter. Number 4. Telephone. 1977. Some operations are designed to remain dormant, hidden for years, waiting for a signal that may never come. And when that signal arrives, the consequences are immediate and irreversible. Telephon explores the concept of sleeper agents activated by a simple trigger. Individuals living ordinary lives suddenly become instruments of a larger strategy. The idea feels unsettling because it suggests that espionage does not always operate in the present. It can be planted far in advance. The activation process is handled with minimal spectacle. A message delivered, a phrase spoken, and everything changes. That simplicity is what makes it believable. Complex systems often rely on simple mechanisms. What follows is a race to contain something that has already begun. The challenge is not just stopping the agents, it is identifying them before they act. The investigation unfolds with urgency but remains grounded in procedure. Patterns are traced, connections are analyzed. Each discovery leads to another question rather than a solution. There is a constant sense that control is slipping away, that the operation has moved beyond the point where it can be fully managed. And that is the unsettling reality. Espionage strategies are not always predictable. Sometimes they are designed to operate long after the people who created them are no longer in control. Number 3. Eye of the Needle, 1981. Isolation can be one of the most powerful tools in espionage. Not isolation imposed by others, but isolation chosen as part of survival. A state where every interaction becomes a risk rather than a necessity. Eye of the Needle places a spy in an environment where remaining hidden becomes increasingly difficult. A German agent carries critical information that must reach its destination. The path is narrow, the margin for error almost non-existent. The tension builds through stillness rather than movement. Silence becomes part of the strategy. Observation replaces action. Every decision is delayed until it becomes absolutely necessary. What makes the portrayal effective is the emphasis on vulnerability. The agent is skilled but not invincible. Circumstances shift unexpectedly. Plans adapt under pressure rather than unfold perfectly. The surrounding environment adds to the strain. Limited space. Limited options. Every encounter carries weight because there are no easy escapes. There is no reliance on elaborate techniques. Only basic tradecraft executed with precision. Concealment, deception, patience, and that is where the realism emerges. Espionage is not always about complexity. Sometimes it is about doing simple things correctly while everything around you becomes increasingly uncertain. Number 2. Hopscotch, 1980. There is a moment when a man decides he no longer wants to play by the rules of the system that trained him, not out of rebellion, but out of clarity, a realization that the structure itself has become predictable. Hopscotch approaches espionage from an unusual angle. A seasoned operative begins to outmaneuver his own agency, not through force, but through understanding how it thinks. That perspective reveals something essential. Intelligence systems rely heavily on patterns, and those patterns can be exploited. The narrative unfolds with a sense of quiet confidence. Every move feels deliberate, not rushed, not reactive. The character anticipates responses before they happen and adjusts accordingly. What makes the portrayal authentic is its focus on tradecraft fundamentals. Identity changes. Travel routes shift. Communication remains indirect. Nothing feels exaggerated because everything operates within believable limits. Even the tone carries a subtle irony. The situation appears almost playful on the surface, yet beneath that lies a sharp critique of bureaucracy. Systems designed for control can become vulnerable when they rely too heavily on routine. The tension does not come from danger alone. It comes from watching a structure struggle to adapt to something it cannot easily categorize. And that is the insight it leaves behind. Espionage is not only about following rules, it is about knowing when those rules can be turned against the people who created them. Number 1. 3 Days of the Condor, 1975. There is a specific kind of fear that arrives without warning. One moment, everything is routine. The next moment, everyone around you is gone. No explanation, no time to process. Only the sudden realization that you are now the target. 3 Days of the Condor captures that shift with relentless precision. A low-level analyst returns to his office to find it completely wiped out. The event itself is shocking, yet what follows is far more disturbing. On survival becomes the primary objective, but survival depends on understanding a system that is already ahead. Every attempt to seek help carries risk. Every contact could be compromised. What defines the narrative is its focus on instinct rather than training. The protagonist is not a field agent. He adapts in real time using logic and observation. That improvisation feels grounded because it emerges from necessity rather than design. The world around him becomes uncertain. Public spaces feel unsafe. Communication feels exposed. Even moments of silence carry tension because they suggest something unseen is already moving closer. There is no clear boundary between threat and protection. The same structure that should provide security becomes the source of danger. And that is what makes it resonate. Espionage is not always about gathering intelligence. Sometimes it is about realizing that you are the one being watched. These stories reveal what espionage truly looks like when the illusion disappears. No heroes, no clean victories, only choices that echo long after they are made. If this changed how you see spy films, then stay with us, because the next story might be even closer to reality.